Welcome to Best Decision Ever, where we believe that life comes down to very few moments and decisions. So we highlight the very people that have had the courage to overcome fear and make the decision to start their business, begin writing that blog, or just stand up for what they believe in. But on this show, we also know that success is only one part of the story. So we dive into the challenges that these people have had to endure to get to their current point of success in order for us to be able to learn their habits, their routines, and the mindset that it takes to be able to become successful in their own right so we can live inspired lives ourselves. For those of you who are new, my name is John, and I'm a performance enthusiast. I love being around people who are at the top of their game in their industry and their craft so I can learn from them and apply it to my own life. Today, we have a very special guest. He is the youngest student to be admitted to Northwestern at the age of 15. Thereafter, he quickly started a hedge fund for sneakers to help his parents pay for the mortgage, at which point he raised $1.4 million and generated millions in revenue over the course of a couple years. Thereafter, he fell in love with fintech through working at JP Morgan and Goldman. Due to his humble beginnings, he was driven to take the financial strategies that have helped him and his team to make his clients millions at Goldman to the general public to help them retire. So he started Lendtable, which essentially is a service that empowers everyday American to save for retirement through taking advantage of their 401k benefits. If that wasn't enough, he was named a Teal Fellow, Forbes 30 under 30, and now is on a mission to help the average American have a safe and comfortable retirement. Without further ado, we have Sheridan Clayborne. Thank you for joining.
Thanks so much for having me. What a hell of an introduction, by
dude.
I'm very excited to be on it.
I appreciate you just coming on. I do want to dive into all things Lendtable. That said, I think that what you stand for right now in talking about financial literacy and the importance of it, especially for people coming out of college with student debt. You know, what does the average American, especially like the 20-something-year-old, not understand about their finances that they really need to start thinking about?
Yeah, I think there's so many complexities. You know, there's kind of the statistic that 1 of every 2 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. Liquidity ends up being kind of one of the biggest concerns. I think what a lot of people don't realize, especially people who are kind of wealthier, is that there's a lot of complexity in being broke. You have to deal with like understanding your credit card payments. Like, when is your paycheck coming in? Is it coming in on the 15th or the 30th? How do I juggle that with rent payments, you know, feeding my kids, paying for kind of a mortgage? Like, how do I think about renting and things like that? So I think a lot of the kind of complexity comes down from the fact that it's not made to be simple. These banking systems weren't really set up and supported to kind of provide services for people who are like lower and middle income. And the bigger issue is just the fact that it's just more complicated. You know, if you make $150,000 a year, like, I'm fortunate to be in a position where if I overpay for something, or if I pay rent a little earlier, or if, you know, a car breaks down and I have a $1,000 expense, I'm fine. I'm not thrilled about it, but it's not making it so I can't pay for the bus tonight. It's not making it so I'm worried about not being able to pay for school, things like that. So I think what you realize is that for the grand majority of Americans, like, you just have so much financial complexity that is laden, and just like not necessarily being able to have access to that liquidity.
Absolutely, and that definitely resonates too. I think that your unique ability from actually experiencing it as a kid and seeing your parents, you know, have, from what I understand, have a hard time, whether it's making rent or whatever it is, just struggling, and how complex it really is to be what we would call in the United States in poverty, right? To have to struggle through that and make ends meet. I definitely want to touch on that, but for people that don't know, what is Lendtable? I don't want them to rely on my description, right? You do a much better job.
I would disagree. I think you did a phenomenal description of it.
What the heck is Lendtable, though, in your words? Why is it so important? And just let's just start there.
Yeah. So the simplest description is kind of much as you described it. We help people take advantage of unutilized and underutilized employee benefits. Right now, we specifically focus on 401k matches and employee stock purchase plans. So as I like to say, we're in the business of giving people wealth building loans. Okay. Now, you might be thinking, well, what exactly do you do? Like, what does that mean? For a little bit of context, there's something called a 401k match. So let's take Walmart as an example. A 401k is a retirement plan. You can kind of think of it like a pension. And companies will offer this thing called a 401k match. For example, Walmart says if you put in $3,000 to your 401k, they will match it. The reason they offer it, it's a benefit that a lot of employees want. It's kind of like healthcare. You know, your employer, it's optional for them to offer healthcare, but if they don't, no one's going to work there because everyone kind of requires healthcare. So what a lot of these kind of employees have access to is this 401k match. If they put in $3,000 to their 401k, they get it matched by their employer. That turns into $6,000. Now, when a lot of people hear that, especially for those who kind of haven't heard of a 401k match before, they're like, that kind of just sounds like free money. Like, why wouldn't anyone kind of just take advantage of that? And shockingly enough, you find that half of the people who have access to it, so nearly 60 million Americans, don't use it. And when I first kind of saw that problem, it didn't make any sense to me because I had that same kind of initial assumption. Like, it's free money. I go, these people just kind of uneducated. Do they not get what a 401k match is? Do they not know how to set it up? And that's certainly part of the issue. You know, there's not great education around 401ks. People don't get the tax benefits. People don't necessarily have the time to do it. But the main reason that people don't use it is more fundamental to that. It's that liquidity problem I was talking about. So there's this kind of caveat on how you can use your 401k match, which is you have to take money out of your paycheck. So if I want to take advantage of Walmart's 401k, I get a $3,000 paycheck reduction. Once that paycheck reduction happens, it goes into my 401k, the company matches it, but that money is going to be locked up for the next year minimum, and more likely than not, until actual retirement age. So what happens, a lot of people in this kind of position, I'm already living paycheck to paycheck, I'm already behind on rent payments, I'm already having to leverage debt. And they need to decide like, oh, well shit, do I need to kind of not feed my kids or save for retirement? So people are actually making a rational financial decision by being like, I just cannot afford to get my match. I need that liquidity. And that's where we step in. So we say, if you have access to this 401k match at Walmart and you're not using it, we'll actually contribute for you. So you don't need to take $3,000 out of your paycheck. We will give you $3,000. You'll then put it in your 401k and get that match. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually make money here? And the way we do it is by a 401k withdrawal. So at these companies, you kind of have the ability to withdraw money from your 401k. If you're below the age of 59 and a half, there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty, but we bake that into the model. So the way the math works at the end of the day is you get to keep 80% of your 401k match if you're below the age of 59. The government gets 10% and we get 10%. So if you've got a $3,000 match, you're going to get $2,400 that you wouldn't have had before. And the biggest thing that we're focused on is finding all of those different kind of pockets of benefits, all of those different kind of wealth building things that you have access to that liquidity is preventing you from accessing. And that's kind of the general idea of giving people wealth building loans.
Absolutely. So essentially, and what I think is so interesting about this idea is it's kind of it's like, it's a no-brainer, right? I mean, people have a matching 401k. You're kind of like, why would I not do this?
Yeah.
I've heard this. We talk about this in other interviews, and I think it's something that's really important. The power of focus, right? You mentioned. I heard you in one interview say, "Hey, I used to focus on 50 things and doing it all myself, and now I focus on 5, and I get them done really well."
Yep.
So we're talking about that, and we could talk in a greater context of life, but especially just in doing your own thing, starting your own company. How important is just like focus and focusing on the right things?
Yeah. Oh, paramount. I've definitely struggled severely with kind of doing way too many things at once. And I think part of it was kind of, I told myself that I was kind of just like scatterbrained and I like focusing on multiple things. But I think part of it was kind of like a fear and lack of conviction around going towards one idea.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If I'm being very
Yes,
frank, I think it was very easy
that.
to be like, because, if I'm working on 5 things and one thing fails and the other thing's kind of plateauing, it's really easy for me to be like, okay, everything's fine. But I think there's very much so a key advantage of like putting all your chips on the table, being like, I'm uniquely focused on this one thing. And if that thing doesn't work out, then I'll need to figure out something else. But it kind of forces you to be like, well, fuck, I don't want the one thing I'm working on to not work out. So I got to figure out how to make this thing work out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've definitely, that was a huge learning point for me. I think I've always struggled with like, I'm working on like 10 different startups simultaneously. And people always ask me like, how the fuck do you do it? And I always give them an answer just like, that's just me. I'm just good at that. But I think it was a cop-out. I think like uniquely focusing on one thing, it just helps direct your thoughts so much more.
I appreciate your honesty too.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people would go, "Oh yeah, it was really a cop out." I seriously, I respect that. I respect the honesty. So thinking about that, like, how did you develop the conviction? This is a problem of a lot of people, even myself in my own life, to develop the conviction to go, you know what, I'm gonna go do this. It's not like nothing wrong with having like a corporate job. That's great, but like I'm gonna go do this, and it's different than the average thing. Or I'm gonna go and get behind this idea and stand for it. How did you develop that conviction, and how do you keep it through all the challenges that you face?
Yeah. So part of it, I think, is kind of just doing something. Like I definitely, especially with a lot of like young entrepreneurs, I kind of get asked like, well, how did you think of this idea? Like, it's like, you know, especially I guess the state is at now, though, you know, it's so great, but like, how did you get there in the first place? And to some degree, I started with a very shitty, half-baked idea where I had no idea if it would work or not.
Okay.
But my thought was always, I can see some people kind of get trapped in this like loop of ideation where it's really easy to kind of just like try to constantly craft and perfect the perfect idea. But I think by and large, the only way you can actually get to a better idea is like coming up with MVP, testing the product, going through like the initial iterations of actually building it. And no matter how good you are at kind of thinking about ideas, if you can't actually put it out there in the wild and get user feedback and see how people respond to it, you have no fucking idea. So to me, it's kind of more of a, what's the downside of launching this? Like the way I've always looked at it is like, okay, before I started this company, I did not necessarily have a successful company. So if I start this company and it doesn't work, great. I continue to be right back to not having a successful company. So I haven't lost anything. So worst case is this doesn't work out and I'm exactly where I kind of started it in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful frame of reference too to come from for people to hear is like, you're really no different. You're in no different of a place besides the fact that you learned a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just more information so that you can go out and do something different, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I think Thomas Edison had a great line around that where it's like, I think every time he failed one of his inventions, he looked at it as a good thing because he's like, great, I know one thing that's not going to work. Like I'm just adding to my repertoire of things I know that aren't going to work. So I'm actually better off than I was initially.
Absolutely. And I think it's fun to talk about like right now, but when you're in practice and the emotions are going, it can be frustrating. Like when you're trying something and it doesn't work and you feel stuck and you're like, am I ever going to get out of this?
Yeah.
And, it's so have you ever had one of those moments before? You're just like, wow, I don't even know if I can do this.
I am literally this is my, I mean, depends how you define company, but this is my 10th company at this point. Okay, so like I started with the sneaker business. Yeah. I was fortunate that kind of went quite well. But past that, you know, I worked on a company that helped non-accredited investors get access to private equity funds. That didn't necessarily work. I worked in a company that helped people submit their rental payments to credit bureaus and agencies so that they could boost their credit and this broader range of credit building services. That didn't work. I worked on a Pokemon Go botting website, and the general idea was that we're going to create this like broader service which was going to help people like scale up their accounts. For many, many reasons, that didn't work. And I'd say that is one of the cases of I should have had a better idea. Most of the time, I'm for the idea of just like go with any idea and see how it works. That one, I probably should have known leading into it that it wasn't the best idea. I mean, prior to this, I even worked on a business that was kind of building a marketplace for tattoo artists and people looking to get tattoos. So I've definitely gone through the kind of emotional throes of starting these companies, the massive amount of investment you kind of put in, both personally, I think it just becomes, at least for me, and I should probably step away from it, but it becomes a very large part of my psyche. Like a large way of kind of how I view myself. It's like the performance of my company, what I'm doing. Like being an entrepreneur is very much so a fundamental aspect of kind of how I view myself. So when those things fail, you know, it's very easy for you to kind of describe yourself like, damn, am I a failure? If like this one fundamental tenet of me is kind of not working out. I can certainly kind of empathize with the feeling of like, you know, being a kind of failure and things not working out.
I appreciate, again, your honesty there is really important to hear. I think that to a certain extent, having your identity attached to it actually enhances the performance too, though. Because then you're like, my name's on this thing, right? Like you have some, like, yes, there are some challenges in that too, but to what extent is it a benefit to have your identity somewhat wrapped up in what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, you need to have in a rational level of kind of confidence and conviction in your own ability to do it. Because if you don't irrationally believe in the success of your company, why would anyone else think about it? Because you know, if you're trying to raise money, if you're trying to hire people, if you're trying to sell, at the end of the day, you're a startup, and there are 1,000,001 reasons for why your company will fail, as there is for literally any company. So at the very least, you need to come in with some fundamental belief that there is a higher likelihood of your thing working out, or you know that you can in some world kind of make it work out. Because if you don't have that belief and conviction, why the hell would anyone else have that belief and conviction?
Very, very, very true. That's well said. Thinking too, like you've obviously started a lot of companies. You've done a lot of stuff. How important is fulfillment and all that, and doing something that fulfills you? So first, I'd probably ask, what is fulfillment to you, and then how important is fulfillment in just what you're building? And
Okay. if I were to get very real, I think sometimes when people talk about fulfillment, they can get a little kind of philosophical.
No, please go. Yeah,
about
go,
it.
yeah.
I think there's like a couple factors. I think the simplest ones to talk about is like money is a fulfilling aspect of it. Like I need to take care of my parents. I need to take care of my family. So there certainly is the kind of fulfilling aspect of like, okay, I know that this project is going to make money. That's great. On top of that, I think there's also, I'm a kind of like outgoing, but also like somewhat egotistical person. So like there is kind of like the cool like confidence boost of like things are going well, other people are talking about it. The kind of like confidence you get from like seeing other people use your product. So I think, those are two tenets, which I'd be completely lying if I said they weren't aspects of it. But if I were to kind of peek below the surface some more, I think one of the other things that I kind of get a lot of value from is I like the complexity. Like I actually just like the fact that I've always been really into puzzles. I've always really been into just kind of games and things like that. And I think there's something really interesting about how many unknowns there are here. Like there's so many different ways that you can kind of play this like broader strategy game of building a company. And there's something cool about all the different kind of avenues and paths you can go down. I think on top of that, there's also one of the reasons I really like this company is the fulfilling aspect of kind of just helping people. I saw it kind of when I was a kid. I think there were so many people who've kind of helped me on my journey to kind of get here. My parents, teachers, mentors that I know for certain I would not be where I'm at if it wasn't for them. So I think being able to kind of pass that back and help people has been very meaningful and kind of impactful to me. Another thing that might be a bit of a weird one, the risk of failure actually really helps kind of ground me. It's something I've kind of kept going back to, and I think not a lot of people necessarily share the sentiment. But to me, when I'm in a place where I feel like there's no risk of failure, it's hard for me to kind of a big driver for me to kind of be productive and to build things is actually knowing that I can fail. Some people do really well with kind of like, positive kind of stimuli of knowing like, there's like benefits and, they can get a little like anxious about failure. Totally makes sense. But at least for me, I need to have both. Like I need to think that there's some positive benefit of this working, but I also, it's kind of like I would liken it to like deadlines with papers. Some people do really well with deadlines. Like if you give me, when I was in school, if you gave me 3 months to do something and I knew I could just like push off the paper at any point, I'm never going to do it. It's going to be fucking terrible. But if you tell me I have 2 days to write this paper, and if I don't, I'm going to fail the class, I'm going to do a hell of a fucking paper. Just because something about that, like, possible kind of mechanism of failure is actually really kind of beneficial to me.
Okay.
So I think I'd say, I know that's a long-winded answer, but I'd say I get fulfillment kind of from all those different aspects. There's, the money aspect, there's kind of the egos aspect, but there's also kind of the complexity of working on something really novel. The kind of internal feeling I get around doing something that actually helps people, moves the world forward, actually makes a positive impact and does something meaningful. So I'd say those are kind of like the main tenets for me that I find fulfillment from.
So it sounds like fulfillment for you is multi-threaded. It's like, hey, can this make some money? The complexity of just putting together the puzzle, and does it have all those elements? And then it drives you. A question I was thinking about is like, have you always been like that of just having? Well, you mentioned you call it negative stimuli. Having negative stimuli, has that always been something that you've had? Have you practiced that to where it's become more of a skill? Like how has that evolved?
I'm sure I always had some base level of that. Okay. Like, that kind of negative stimuli could kind of be a driver, or like, the ego is kind of a driver. Part of what I've realized is that it kind of self-reinforces, and I think this kind of happens for everyone. Like if you realize that, when you're more extroverted and kind of happy and outgoing, you get positive responses from people, you kind of like continue to like play into this character. You already have kind of a natural bent and leaning to it, and then when you get good responses from that character trait, you kind of do it more. So I'm sure it's kind of a combination. I'm sure I've kind of done it all the time since I was a kid. I had some natural leaning bent towards doing it. Then I also got like positive feedback from people in kind of my own life, so it self-reinforced it. So I'd assume probably like a healthy combination of both.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's really good self-awareness of just you thinking through, okay, like how did I come to be this? But I think a lot of people miss that. They don't have that. How do you gain that self-awareness? Do you journal? Do you just take time to think about it? Is it just something you've always, I'm curious.
Yeah. Damn, I should probably journal.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good answer.
That's fair.
Yeah. I can talk a lot, so I can give you a long-winded response, but quite frankly, I have no idea.
Hey, we only do the honesty here. No bullshit. All right?
I love it.
So curious. Let's go change gears a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that you've stated several times that you're very bullish on San Francisco.
Absolutely.
Like, let's talk about that. Like,
Yeah.
why? I'm just gonna stop. Why bullish on San Francisco?
Yeah. Well, I think, to the nature of the show, talking about, those kind of key decisions, I think best thing I could have ever done was move to San Francisco. For any kind of entrepreneurs who might be listening to this, the reason it was so beneficial to me was just the density of talent out here. When I was in Chicago, I very much so felt like I was kind of the only one. Like I was the only one who was kind of talking about dropping out or thinking about startups. And it's not like I wasn't surrounded by a bunch of very kind of smart, successful friends, but it was just like a different mindset. Coming out here, I don't feel like I'm all that unique. I think there's things I'm doing that are kind of special and different, but at the end of the day, I have a lot of friends who I'd say are very, very similar to me. And I think you end up being kind of like, the summation of like the 5 people that you're kind of around. And I very much so felt that out here, that you're just like surrounded by so many like-minded entrepreneurs. Everyone's trying to do something that'll change the world. Most of it's going to fail and blow up in flames. But they keep going. And actually like it's a great kind of driving mechanism. So I could not possibly promote San Francisco more strongly. I think it's by far and away the best decision I've ever made to come out here.
I appreciate that you've been able to take that reflection and that you've really thought about, okay, I want to put the right people around me. I want to have the right environment.
Yeah.
Because even just like, I'm actually even reading Atomic Habits
that's a good book.
By James Clear. He talks about so much about, actually, I haven't thought about this interview.
Yeah.
Because he's talking so about the environment.
Yeah.
How important the environment is.
Yeah.
That you're average of the 5 people you're around, and like that is going to dictate most of your behavior to a certain extent. As I interpreted the book, he might mean something else, but that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, it's unbelievable, like that. I think just some of the foresight that you had, like, okay, this is not the place for me. I need to go to San Francisco and make it work, make it happen. What have been some of the challenges that you faced in after coming to San Francisco, whether it's personally or just like trying to find your group? Or I think there's a lot of things that are stopping people from making a big decision of starting a company, moving somewhere, whatever it is being able to get over the fact that there's going to be challenges in their side, but that also like understand that you can get through it.
Yeah.
So like, what have been some of the challenges, and how have you gotten through them, dude?
Oh yeah, I mean, when I first came out to San Francisco, I was not doing well. I mean, it was like I dropped out of school. I started working at Dropbox. Love the people there. Incredibly appreciative for the opportunity. Hated it. I was at probably one of the lowest points in my life where I was kind of doing this job that I got no fulfillment from. And I also didn't really know what to do. I didn't necessarily know any people out here. I was still trying to build my kind of community and tribe. The Dropbox like happy hour food was fantastic, so I'd also put on like 30 pounds, so that wasn't helping my kind of like mental state either. But yeah, I mean, part of it was just fortuitous. Like I met my kind of co-founder Mitchell through like a happenstance kind of introduction through my manager at Dropbox. He ended up being the best thing that's ever happened to me. I view him kind of now as my older brother. Kind of I've learned so much from him, and I've enjoyed working with him so much. But yeah, it was certainly really hard earlier on. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't necessarily know why I was out in San Francisco. I kind of had this ideal of I was going to come out here and do all the startup stuff, but none of what I was doing felt like what I was kind of trying to do or what my purpose was. So initially early on, it was very difficult.
And what'd you do to get through some of those hard times? So I think people do really get stuck in let's say the trough or whatever, and they really like they almost don't get out. So then their identity is wrapped around that, and you're stuck. How did you get through some of that? Just like a habits routine, or just what you said to yourself, or because that's challenging when you don't really have a support community. Like you dropped. You were young. How old were you?
I was 18 when I dropped out of college.
You were 18 years old. Like frankly, putting on weight does not help. Like,
that didn't help.
It doesn't, because it hurt. Like, at least in my experience, like it hurts your everything. And mentally, you don't feel good. Like what did you do?
Part of it, I just had to be kind of realistic about myself. I think I was coming into the office every day. I was like, I don't know why I'm here. And it was really easy to give all these excuses. Well, I'm already here. I haven't even made it a year. Like, I should stay. Like, I'm making money. I mean, I was making 4 times more than my parents made cumulatively. Like, that's crazy. Like, I just dropped out. I was 18. At the same time, though, I think I just had to be really realistic with myself. I was like, is this money making a meaningful impact in my life? No. Am I developing meaningful skills at this job that I think are beneficial elsewhere? kind of, but not necessarily. So at some point I just needed to say like, well, what am I actually going to kind of derive enjoyment and kind of fulfillment from? And the kind of decision I came to in my head was, look, if I do a startup right now and it fails, like I kind of mapped this all out on an
I
Excel
remember you
sheet.
talking about this actually. Yeah, you got Excel.
I'm
you should dive into this. This is so important.
I can totally talk about the spreadsheet. So I think when a lot of people are thinking about kind of leaving a company, it's important to be like very realistic about like what's the actual worst case that can happen. So I'd say like if let's just say you're a 40-year-old and you're kind of like father of 3, there's some real risk. Like maybe you have no savings, and if you quit your job, you've got 2 months of runway, and if you can't make something work then, you're not going to be able to like pay your rent and feed your kids. Okay, that's a very real downside. You should think long and hard if you are comfortable stomaching that risk. For me, in the position I was in, I was fortunate that I'd kind of had some money on the side from my prior company, had kind of, like made $1 million from that when I was younger. But I even told myself, like, even if I had none of that money and I had like 50 grand, I was like, I know that I can kind of live on that for the next 2 years. And sure, I'm not going to be thrilled about spending my savings down to nothing, but at the end of the day, I can stomach it. I know that like if I quit this job and I try to do a startup for 6 months and it doesn't work out, more likely than not, I can go back and get the same job. Even if that doesn't work, I can probably get a job at a similar comp. Worst case, I'd say I get a job that has significantly less comp, but still enough for me to like sustain myself. So for me, I kind of just like created like an Excel sheet where I just said like, what do I think the expected probability of all these things is? And that's hard to say because at the end of the day, you have no idea. But implicitly, you're making these. You're thinking about these things in your head anyways. Like you are saying like, well, what is the likelihood that like I'm homeless? What is the likelihood that like I can't eat? And I think instead, if you like map it out and lay it out on a chart, it's easier for you to actually rationalize, like, am I being realistic about the actual downsides here? Or am I kind of overly being concerned about the unknown? For me, like once I saw like the chart of probabilities of what could happen of like this company working out, this company failing, me working at this company for 2 years versus like me staying at this current job, it became abundantly clear I need to quit. Like there's no upside of me staying here. Like worst, in my mind, it was like worst possible case. I do this company for 2 years. It completely crashes and burns. I learn a lot. I build up kind of a new skill set. Maybe I can even go back into the workforce and get a better job. But let's assume that doesn't happen. Let's just assume I get the same job or worse job. That's fine. I tried it out. I get a better idea if it's something I wanted to do. I already have a very strong inclination towards doing it. So to me, it actually felt like there was no risk of doing a startup. Because I was like, even in the worst case where it fails and I get a worse job, that's fine. I literally didn't lose anything.
I love even hearing it again that you walk through, because I think people make decisions kind of rationally or they don't think through it, but like you walk through, okay, like what is the scenario? What is the probability?
Yeah.
What's the expected value?
Yeah.
You really like it's a thoughtful process. And
yeah.
It kind of reminds me of Tim Ferriss's his fear setting, but also his like fear rehearsal.
Yeah.
You think through the worst case, and you go, oh, it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
Right. And you just think about the probability. It's a thoughtful way to go about it.
And I guess one other thing to add is I think people also underestimate the risk of their company. Like Dropbox, I think 6 months after I left, went through a bunch of layoffs. Some people that I had started with got laid off, completely out of their control. So I think
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that was, that didn't. I wasn't. I'm certainly very sad my friends got laid off. It's not like I was like, oh yes, I made the right decision. But I think that's the other thing people need to realize, which is just like if you're doing your own startup, you do have a lot of control in your hands. And if you're working for a company, they can also fire you. You can get laid off at literally any point in time.
That's a really good point that I have not thought of.
Like it's also
like, you are right. They could just like, because you just kind of expect like, oh, the XYZ startup that I'm working at, it's going to be okay, and like I'll just work there and be fine.
Yeah.
But you really don't think about that.
Yeah. So I think it's like important to like look at both the downsides of like you kind of going after this new. Obviously, I'm kind of framing this in the context of like leaving your job to kind of to work on your own startup. But like there's also a very real, tangible downside of like you staying in a job you hate. You're not building up any skill sets. You're not learning more. You're going to stagnate. Depression, just like general kind of like mindset stuff. Like those are all. Even if you're just being pragmatic and saying, I'm trying to optimize how much money I'm making, those all fuck up your ability to make money. Like if you're not focused and you don't care about what you're doing, there's real downside of you doing 20, 30 hours of work a week, completely unfocused, not learning anything, versus you going to a startup, you're doing 60, 80 hours of work a week, but you're learning a lot. Even if you don't make any money from it, you are implicitly making yourself a lot more valuable.
Totally agree. What do you say to someone that, and you worked for it, so I do have a very high respect for your scrappiness, which I do want to talk about in a second because you are scrappy.
Yeah.
What do you say to someone that comes out of college?
Okay.
They have student loans.
Yep.
They have parents to retire, and they want to go start their own company, and they're walking through this because for you've taken the risk, you built it,
sure.
but you do have that cash.
Yeah,
Whereas
for sure.
other people, they might be making $120K,
sure.
but they have student loans,
sure.
they have parents to retire.
Sure.
They want to start their own thing. Well, how do you help them think through that? What do you tell them?
Yeah. So that's a great question because that was, to be clear, definitely a different position than I was in. I think the first thing I'd kind of test is, I think there's a lot of people who like the idea of startups, but actually wouldn't want to do a startup. Like they don't necessarily like the risk. They don't like the kind of swinginess of it. It freaks them out. Like to me, I kind of like the possible of like this company failing. It helps drive me and makes me work more. For a lot of people, it can kind of be debilitating. So I think the first thing I'd kind of recommend, especially if they haven't done a startup before, do it on your free time. So like what I was doing at Dropbox is I was like, all right, I'm going to do my 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Didn't necessarily need to work all that much. I'm going to spend the rest of my time after this working on my startup. Okay. And if at some point I decide, okay, I've been doing this for a month, I really fucking like what I'm doing, I see some promise, and also I'm getting to the point where I'm doing so much work that my job at Dropbox is fucking it up, I'm gonna quit. So I think that's one thing you should test with. Like if you're doing a 40-hour-a-week kind of job right now, if you do a startup, you're gonna have to do more time to make it successful. Yeah. 80 plus, if not sometimes 100 plus, just because you need to get things done. Start testing it now. Like start doing 20, 30, 40 hours a week. Do you feel like there's a lot more things you need to do, or do you feel like it is very much so manageable into the current time you have? And then once you come to the decision that I like it, what I'm actually doing, I think it has some promise, and on top of that, like my current job is taking away from it, then it's time to start thinking about kind of leaving. And then I think it gets into the more kind of real pragmatic question of like, well, how much runway do you have?
Yeah.
If you quit this job, like what are you paying in rent? How much cash do you have on hand? Are you supporting your parents? When are your student loan payments due? If you were to tell me like I've got no money in the bank, I'm taking care of my parents, I'm in a new city, sucks to say, but you need to be very, very pragmatic about how much you can make it. Like if you've only got a month of runway, shit's probably not going to work. You can try to will it into existence, but you also need to be kind of realistic about your situation. But then comes like, I think there's a lot of other things you can kind of do on the side to supplement it. So like, how can you kind of get more money into your savings? Like even moving to a place, like if you got a remote job as an example, I'd say try to move to a place like San Francisco, try to move to a place where you've got this like greater density of kind of entrepreneurs. Is there a way that you can kind of like quasi fundraise on the side? But like be pragmatic about it. But the first thing to test is like, do you actually want to do a fucking startup? Because I would say doing a startup is not for most people. Just like they don't like it. Like, they're dealing with too much risk. They don't enjoy kind of the process of going through it. So it's about understanding if you actually enjoy it first.
And to that point, what do people not understand about creating a startup? Because I think you're right. Like the word entrepreneur is so used now. It's like what is it really like to like build a startup and go through the challenges and go through the hurdles? Like what do people just not understand about that?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to call it, there's a lot of different kinds of startups. So you've got like the classic Silicon Valley tech startup where you raise a bunch of venture money, you kind of scale up a team, you're not profitable for a long period of time. And then like my parents were entrepreneurs, but they were retail entrepreneurs. Yeah. And the questions and kind of things you got to consider there are very different. I'd say if you're going into like a venture-based startup, like kind of Silicon tech startup, a couple things to be cognizant of is you can go through many iterations. So I have a lot of friends of mine who are very successful, $1 billion plus companies under 30. They've gone through many, many pivots where they have completely scrapped their team, completely scrapped the company, worked on a completely different thing, and has gone through iterations of that. Because at the end of the day, they realized the initial idea that they had didn't work. They couldn't execute on it, all these different kind of constraints. I think outside of that, you kind of deviate between these two really interesting kind of mind spaces of, to some degree, I'd almost call it like a God complex of like, oh my God, I'm the best. I'm going to change the world. It's going to be fucking amazing. I'm going to make billions, if not trillions of dollars. To, holy shit, nothing's working. I have no fucking idea what I'm doing. This whole thing's a lie. I've built this entire company on a bed of just like of nothing. And it's like, you need to kind of manage both mindsets. That's I think the thing that's surprising to a lot of kind of like first-time entrepreneurs is like you can really go through these very different headspaces, which is interesting to see.
Yeah, and I appreciate you going through like the actual behind the scenes of that, because a lot of people just don't understand that at all. And to that extent too, from the outside looking in, you seem, and I've heard you talk about this too, like just you seem really scrappy. You seem like you're able just to kind of put stuff together. And how important is that into just building a quality company and then pivoting, to your point, and just being adaptable as things happen? How important is that scrappiness?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you were to say like, why do startups exist when you've got all these like massive incumbents like Google and Facebook? I think the key advantage that startups have is scrappiness. Like you can pivot. If Google wants to change their kind of like corporate vision, they need to get 100 people together, and it's going to take 6 months, and you got to do all these different things. Whereas for a startup, you can be super nimble. You got 3 people who are working on it. You can constantly change and adapt. You have to. COVID being one of the best examples of that. Imagine being a travel company. 2 years ago, COVID hits, like you just fundamentally need to change what you're doing. And if you don't, you are going to be obsolete tomorrow. So like the ability to kind of rapidly change and iterate on what you're doing is both imperative, but also one of the best advantages you have. Like that's the reason that Google and Facebook, with their hundreds of thousands of people, aren't creating every new company in the world, because they don't have that same level of scrappiness and nimbleness and like the ideation and creativity to be able to take these kind of big swings and big bets.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really about, too, as you mentioned, is the ability to take the big swing and the big bet is what it seems like, and then actually fall through that with some execution. Right? Yeah. It's one thing to say it, but then go do it is a whole different ball game.
Exactly.
I want to dive in a little bit into like routines, habits. What do you do on a day-to-day basis that helps you to stay focused, consistent, and just like mentally stable, especially, again, as you mentioned, through the pivots, through all the challenges? What do you do?
Yeah, a lot of it's basic stuff. I think working out, sleeping consistently, leaving time for just like meditation and kind of like spending time with yourself.
What does that look like? Do you mind diving in?
So part of this is like a do as I say, not as I do. Okay. So I think, if I were to look like 2 months ago, I was great about it. Like I had a very consistent sleep schedule, very consistent working out schedule. I think, work has picked up definitely quite significantly recently. So it's been harder to kind of stay consistent, but I've certainly seen that I am at my best when I have all these other things also working. I think like it's really easy to kind of just like fall into this trap of just like I'm only exclusively focused on my startup right now and let other things fall by the wayside. And I think it is one of those things of like, in the short term, it looks like it's helpful. It's kind of like not staying up and working for 3 days. In the short term, yes, you did just do 72 hours of work. In the long term, you're kind of fucked. Like it's gonna fuck up your productivity. It's gonna fuck up your sleep schedule. Who knows how good of a quality that work you're actually doing is. I think on top of that, just like other people that you can kind of talk to about it who are going through similar things. Shit sucks sometimes. It just does. Like you're worried about your company failing. You're worried because you just lost your biggest customer. You've got some fundamental issue with the company. This may be your first time hiring and you're having an issue with kind of an employee because you have no idea how to manage because you've never been a manager before. So having people that you can kind of talk to about it and mentors and people you can kind of lean on for emotional support, super, super helpful. Just to kind of help you keep you grounded and give you like a second outside opinion.
Okay. So it sounds like obviously the basics: sleep, meditate, eat right, work out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Also, too, I've been hearing the more people like yourself I talk to, it's the support system, dude.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh my God. How did you form that when you're here in San Francisco? Yeah. How important is that? Like, I keep hearing that.
It helps for everything. It both helps for just like when shit's not going well, but also like when shit is going well. Like, your kind of buddies, they know other engineers, they can help you think about hiring, they give you a different perspective. I think the biggest thing I've kind of realized in startups, everyone's fucking making it up as they go. Even these seasoned executives, people are just making shit up. Like they have no fucking idea. So I was actually just listening to a podcast with Mr. Beast, the YouTuber, who had a very, I thought, great kind of perspective on it. Given that everyone is making it up as they go, people are also learning from their mistakes. So why would you just want to learn from your own mistakes? When you have 6 of your buddies, you can learn from all of their mistakes. When they fuck something up, they communicate it to you. Great. I know what they fucked up. I have a better idea of what not to do in the future. So being able to have that group kind of understanding of things you can kind of test with and do helps a lot. So it's like both a support system, but also just like people to chat to about it. They can help make introductions. They can help you understand like how to hire. It just kind of helps you with everything.
Okay. Yeah. It really sounds like getting the support system is just useful in all cases.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. As we wrap up here, I do want to ask what if you had to gift any books What books would you give to people?
Ooh, okay. So a good buddy of mine, Ryan Buslow, wrote 2 books, Fundraising and Recruiting.
Okay.
Could not recommend it highly enough. If you are trying to fundraise or recruit, it is a literal must read. I think there's so many things that things that are kind of non-obvious that people can kind of start doing with fundraising, kind of recruiting. Outside of that, I mean, this isn't a startup book. The Beginning of Infinity, fantastic book,
Really?
super, super interesting.
Okay.
What else did I say? It's a good book. I'm reading the Will Smith book right now. Great book.
How is that?
Fantastic audiobook. Best audiobook I've ever heard. It's almost like the audiobook is done kind of like a movie.
Okay.
Where it's like the production value for it is like fucking fantastic. David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me.
Oh man, that thing will change you.
Yeah. Then there's also like, I think a lot of the startups books I'd recommend would be like the general startup books everyone recommends. So like 0 to 1, The Great CEO Within. What else are good books? Yeah, but like that's a list you'd get on what should startup founders read? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Just curious too. So I'm personally curious. Like, what do you do for fun, dude? Like, you have a bunch of stuff you work, but like, what do you do for fun?
Oh, I mean, one is I genuinely really fucking enjoy what I'm doing. Like, I love startups. I think even if I made no money from this shit, I always just kind of go back to it. So I love just like talking to other people about startups on the weekend, shit like that. But in a completely non-work related sense, like rock climbing, working out. I'll play any sport. Just like love kind of being active, doing shit like that. Okay. I also fuck around and do stuff that isn't just like, productive, making me sound like a functioning human being. Recently been playing like League of Legends Wild Rift, like the mobile game. Okay. Complete waste of fucking time. But like, I kind of enjoy it.
Everyone needs that, right?
Everyone needs that. Been like reading, but I really just love working on like projects. Like I think like kind of new ideas and stuff like that is super, super fun and interesting.
Okay.
So like a lot of the stuff I've kind of been doing in my free time has been like, venture investing in my friends or like working on like this like crypto side project, or like helping my brother fundraise for his company. Like to me, yes, it's work and yes, it's kind of, I guess, revolving around money to some degree in startups, but it's also like very fun. Like I very much so do I have a lot of pleasure from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It seems like for you, it's just like creating is such a core part of your identity.
Yeah. I thoroughly enjoy, like this is, I'm very grateful to be in this spot. Like this is what I've wanted to do since I was a kid, and I'm loving every fucking minute of it. So like I don't know, I'm thoroughly enjoying what I'm doing now.
That is so awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we ask the final question, where can people find you? Where can they learn about Lendtable, learn about you?
Yeah, so Lendtable.com. You can find any info kind of about the site, about the startup. We've got a bunch of kind of news articles, so if you want to check that out to get more information, check it out there. If you want to email me, Sheridan@Lendtable.com. If you want to message me, my phone number is 224-392-3892. I don't really give a fuck. Feel free to message me. What else did I say? Yeah, just hit me up about whatever. I don't know. I'm down for a chat.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
That's my actual phone number, but that's not a business phone number. That's my personal phone number.
Yeah, I believe you. That's so awesome. All right, the final.
First person to give out a phone number on the podcast?
Fuck
yeah, I'll take
easily,
it.
Dude. Easily,
Hell yeah, love that.
First person.
Yeah, I'll repeat. 224-392-3892.
Oh,
it's my personal number.
Man. All right, final question. What would you tell someone that's on the other side of making a big decision, whether they want to, as we said, even at the top of the show, start that company, go for that investment round, or just travel across the country to go get a different taste of life or start whatever it is.
Yeah.
What would you tell them when they're looking, they're afraid, they're afraid of the challenges? What would you tell them?
Maybe make an Excel sheet, honestly. Yeah, okay. Like Excel sheets are great. I mean, I think a lot of fear can be very much so justified. Like maybe you're like, I'm thinking of making a huge decision of like quitting my very high paying job and traveling across the country. And then they look at an Excel sheet. They're like, wait, I just realized I'm broke. I have no money. I can't travel across the country. Great. That's a great reason to not travel across the country. So I think Excel sheets are underutilized. Like just like write out as many of your concerns and try to put some like a general probability and like general, hey, if it's money-based, like general money around it or other kind of metrics around it, because you're already doing it in your head. But at least for me, it's very helpful to actually see it on paper when making these decisions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Use an Excel spreadsheet. Key takeaway.
Big Excel spreadsheet.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sheridan, so much for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for watching. Please, as I always say, be sure to take the lessons that these people like Sheridan have taught you, whether it's through the routines or just philosophies on making decisions on life, and apply them to your life so you can live your own version of an inspired life. Thank you so much for watching. This is Best Decision Ever. See ya.